Thanks, everybody. And so my name is Seth Hartig, and I'm from the, as Chanel said, the National Center for Children and Poverty, located at Bank Street Graduate School of Education. I'm presenting today on a collaborative effort with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta called the Policy Rules Database. And the Policy Rules Database is really housed at the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, but we've been working with them since its inception about 2020 to combine the rules that we work on for our tools online into the sort of common understanding, common methodologies for this database and for the technical manual and for associated tools that the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta has on their site. So this slide says the Policy Rules Database includes rules for all major tax and transfer programs in the U.S., including federal, state, county level rules, historical rules also. There's been a sort of backlog going back to about 2011, the work, and it also includes recent provisions of the American Rescue Plan Act and other related COVID policies, that's 2021. And one of the special things about it is it's a public good, so there's a technical manual available freely online with no barriers to access, as well as the database itself, which is available as long as users sign a data use agreement. And so quickly, these are the list of programs and policies that are included in the Policy Rules Database and technical manual. As you can see here, it includes taxes, the major tax credits like the CTC, FTC, and CTC-TC, child nutrition programs such as the School Breakfast Program, National Lunch Program, SNAP, WIC, TANF, Medicaid, CHIP, the whole alphabet soup here, including pre-tax credits and health insurance, Section 8. We're working on LIHEAP, but we've also expanded recently to include the CCDF subsidies, Head Start, Pre-K, and SSI and SSDI. So it's a lot of stuff in there, and really the inception of it is it's sort of a bit of a shift from some of the previous demonstrations and presentations today. Is that the real inception of it was more around research and policy analysis, as opposed to sort of screeners or people working directly with clients, even though there are applications and tools that are really geared towards clients or the client level case managers. And so the answer is sort of the idea of it was to answer questions around potential changes in benefit structures or benefit policies that states and localities and federal government employs around, sort of these questions that Federal Reserve Bank was interested in, and that I've been working for a while in NCCP with state administrators and state advocates around what happens when these policies change and how do they affect the livelihoods and the budgets of families at the local level, as well as sort of policy simulations to sort of see that more in the aggregate, and also to inform and guide policy tools that are available on the Atlanta Fed's website, including the dashboards they work on, sort of these cliff analysis. Lots of work is around benefit cliffs, really. So what happens when earnings rise and you hit an eligibility limit and you lose benefit? How does that affect your finances? What benefits are there to sort of mitigate or reduce the impact of those cliffs? So the Atlanta Fed has several of these tools. One is called the PRD, just alphabet soup here. The PRD dashboard is Public Policy Rules Database dashboard. The CLIP is a long acronym I can't remember. But really, there's dashboards really for more workforce development initiatives that are housed in workforce development systems to help encourage people to potentially pursue certain careers like in health professions or I think IT professions, sort of build their careers and see how like on the long term engagement these programs might impact not only their earnings but also might impact the benefits they can access to. And what's special about the work project sort of in general is it's been a collaborative effort. That there's the Atlanta Fed early on recognized that there were tools out there that really did a lot to analyze benefits as earnings rise, including the work at National Center for Children and Poverty since 2004, to continually expand on the benefits that we're working on to include SNAP and TANF and CCDF and the whole gamut of stuff. And so instead of trying to recreate the wheel, they work with us to develop sort of a set of joint methodologies that are captured in this database, the Policy Rules Database and this associated technical manual, in order for them to translate that into their tools, which are in R. So as you can see from this graphic, there's like the stuff that we're working on in National Center for Children and Poverty is really is in Perl, which is sort of ancient language not many people know anymore. But the work that they do is in R, and they're trying to move it towards an open source platform. But in order to get sort of not have it locked in methodology or locked in computer language people need to know to understand these policies, we agreed to create a sort of these joint resources captured like a PRD, which is really just a set of Excel tables, and the PRD technical manual, which is more the rules within that guide the program is written in kind of pseudocode. And referring to the table, the parameters in the table, to guide people trying to understand these policies and to implement it possibly on their own platforms. So I'm going to share with you a few snippets from this, but this is sort of an example for pre tax credits, right, or the ACS subsidies, it's commonly called, or Obamacare subsidies. So on the table side, or sort of on the user side, we'll need to enter in to model these benefits or model specific tax credit. Family size, the ages of the family members, how much, whether they're accessing employer health care or not, and then of course their income. And then what the database does and what the rules engine really works to extrapolate on is this list of parameters that are needed to calculate the benefit, obviously. So I'm sure not to tell people in this sphere, these are all very specific rules, and there's this sliding scale system, so that the more you make, the less the pre-tax credit you get. And so the database itself contains the different parameters that are needed to model this thing, but in a very kind of easily accessible table format. And so quickly, this is the technical manual that the snippet from the technical manual that is associated with a specific benefit, the pre-tax credit. So it looks at, these, and this is sort of in, and it's not really in a specific language, it's just kind of this in pseudocode that someone working with Python or working in R or JavaScript could easily take on and put it into the language that they know best. And we have this ability available online on the website in a few minutes. But of course, this obviously is not workable code, and so this is a snippet from the Atlanta Fed's PRD dashboard, or the Atlanta Fed's R code that guides all these different tools. And this is, as you can see, it's a pretty long code. That this is the same thing that was in pseudocode before, but translated into R. Since I can get to Pelton sort of a walkthrough in a minute if I have time, but that kind of code is then translated into these different tools the Atlanta Fed uses. This is one particularly like this PRD dashboard. And so on the left-hand side of this tool, users can enter the different programs they're interested in modeling at the individual family level. I chose this New Jersey. This would have this for all 50 states. And so if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, you can see, these are the number of adults and the children and the ages of the children, really the basic stuff you need to model a pretty rudimentary version of how these benefits work for a family as their income rises. And so on the right-hand side of the screen, you see, as the family income increases from $1,000, say, to $100,000, it's really more of a policy analysis version of this. It's not necessarily a specific family we're looking at, but it's a range of families, sort of, you can imagine, with different incomes. And the Medicaid for adults, excuse me, as you can see here, there's different cutoff points. For example, the family loses Medicaid for adults around $30,000, a little less than $30,000. We lose SNAP a little bit later at the $40,000, and then way on down the line that you lose Medicaid for children, so that's $70,000. And so this is also sort of half the equation in terms of what the family experiences. As their earnings rise, they're also experiencing changes in their expenses. And so if you scroll further down on the screen, you get to like this sort of line graph, which shows the difference between the sum of the family's earnings plus the benefits that they receive, less their expenses that they face as their income rises, which I think in the benefits version of this specific tool, the expenses are constant and the benefits react against those expenses. So as their income rises, you can see these same cliffs are happening here at $30,000, $40,000, before $40,000, and at $75,000, or so $78,000 for loss of these adult Medicaid, SNAP, and child Medicaid, respectively. And so, working with states and different agencies with this information, you can see the possibilities for potential policy reform and how states might look at these things and try to figure out, well, how do we make it so that families aren't suffering as their income rises? And also, one of the neat things about this work is that this is all the Atlanta Fed's dashboard, and this is the similar methodologies around their tools. But we work at it also in the National Effort on Poverty to model kind of similar graph. We use different methodologies here, but this is basically, you can see the same kind of cliffs and impact points where families are experiencing losses of benefits at the same $30,000, $40,000, and $75,000. And really the benefit here is that we're not, even though the methodology is slightly different on the cost side of things, in terms of the policies that we're modeling, there's really consistency between our different tools. And the idea really of it is to create this feedback loop that I think I missed a slide. There's of the different programs that we're working on that sort of manifest the rules that each of these tools are sort of working on. I'm sorry, I got a little lost here, but essentially we're working on the same rules platform to model the output that we're generating for each of these tools. I think that's sort of it. That's the Q&A here. These are different email addresses for the contacts. The NFED and myself, Elias and Ellie weren't here to be able to hear today, but you can email any of us with questions about this. I included the links here for the PRD website, which is the sort of, you can access the publicly available stuff there. The tool I showed you, the dashboard, as well as the Family Research Simulator, which is the last slide that I used. And I think that's all. I think it's about 10 minutes for me. So happy to answer any questions you have. I'll shut down this PowerPoint.
Thank you, Seth. We do have a couple of questions in the chat already. From Margaret, ask, who is responsible for writing the pseudocode for the policy rules database, and what is their background and skill set?
Well, it's a collaborative effort. So we write the pseudocode in a shared Google Doc, and then we sort of back and forth. And they have some policy experts that they're consulting to ensure that and they also test it against other tools available online, make sure that it's correct. But for the most part, we go through the different policy manuals and it's sort of myself and Elias and Ellie, as well as their team over there at the NFED and the team that I have at NCCP, really work collaboratively on this Google Doc and have sort of it's an ongoing dialogue. So there are questions that are asked in there. We're trying to figure out how these rules are applying for different situations. One of the things we're trying to do right now is expand it to beyond the sort of the basic populations that we're modeling to include more marginalized populations. So the efforts to include SSI and SSDI are an effort to include disability in the NFED's tools, and working on different populations now, including homeless individuals and veterans. So to answer the question, I'm sorry if I went on a bit of a tangent there.
No, that's fine. Melanie, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, this is so exciting. I just love cliffs, or as I like to call them, curves, because cliffs make families a little nervous. Curves you can come back from. Yeah, more curves than cliffs. So how are all of you groups maintaining these formulas right now? Like how up to date?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, it is, especially in this dynamic policy environment, it's difficult to continually keep abreast of the different policy changes, especially during COVID. You know, the 2020, 21 years have been a lot of changes at the federal policy level for policies that really were pretty constant prior to that. So the NFED is pretty diligent about trying to locate when rules change and consulting policy, and going back in there. That's part of the germination of including the American Rescue Plan Act in there, because it was so different after 2020 and 2021 compared to before, that we couldn't just sort of imagine this world away, even for policy analysis purposes, that we had to really include them. And so we're still working on a system currently to make sure that we're keeping tabs of when rules change, especially, you know, some things are updated annually, right? It's just very predictable, but some things are really need to be responsive to legislation. So it's definitely something we're trying to improve our ability to track things in real time. But I think that's also one of the reasons why they moved to more of a historical approach, where we're sort of tracking 1 year by 1 year. And so we're not going to update 2022 or 2023 until we make sure we have the policies that are.
Okay, so it's going to be more looking for the cliffs. Okay, great.
Yeah, I mean, the cliff, right? Sorry, were you talking about cliffs?
Well, both, but it's
yeah. I mean, the eligibility criteria is what we look at, so that's it's reflected in the cliffs that are.
Thank you so much. Betsy, I see your hand is raised. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. Thanks for this presentation. I'm curious about I have more questions about the pseudocode. Could you say more about like who is the audience for those pseudocode interpretations of the rules? Is that just internal to your team, or do you have like external developers who are also benefiting from those?
I think it's actually more for the external folks. I mean, it's internal in terms of trying to make sure the pseudocode is right, and the NFED is working on making that into R, and we're making sure that that's consistent with the programming we do in Perl. But it's more of a public resource is how I sort of see it, that it's less of an internal resource once we put it out there, once we make sure that it's consistent with our tools. The pseudocode and I can show you that there's a lot more than the pseudocode and the technical manual. It's also an explanation of the programs in just English language in terms of the limitations of the tool, but also of the pseudocode, but also the explanation of what the program actually does. So it's really a supplement to those explanations. So we're talking about, like I mentioned earlier, the premium tax credits. Prior to that pseudocode, there's 2 pages or so on what this thing does and how it works, and then after that explanation, then we get to the pseudocode. So if someone is kind of programming savvy or developer savvy, they can see how that works within the pseudocode. Or if they're trying to design a tool that is based on the Tools database, they can really take that pseudocode and just sort of adapt it into Python or JavaScript or the language they're working in. So it's a bit of a mixed audience approach, but it's sort of certainly compatible for people who aren't necessarily trained programmers to understand.
Thank you. What are the limits of this tool, but also what are the possibilities of this tool?
Yeah, thanks. So the limits, I think I also spoke a bit about the limitations in that there are a lot, I think someone referred to in a previous session about obscure rules, and there's certainly a lot of rules in these programs, and we have a good amount of them in the database, but they're, certainly we're talking about larger families or families where households are defined across different locations, or families are defined across different locations, and there's several limits to how the tool can express the output for there. So that's one limitation. But in terms of the potential, I think one of the benefits of these line graphs that I presented at the end of the slides, that if you can imagine kind of a double line graph of sort of this is where the current policy is, but if you make this slight change, then you see the family is so much better. There are fewer cliffs, or the curve is smoother, or you're much higher, closer to the break-even line of where your budget is, where you're sort of in the black instead of in the red. Then you can sort of have a very nice visual representation of these policy change, and I think that's a lot of state administrators are interested in, or policy advocates are interested in, sort of rather than trying to express something in completely computer code or like these numbers that aren't necessarily easily understandable, to try to have a tool with a very visual output that you can say to sort of someone who's not necessarily computer savvy, but sort of a policymaker staff or the policymaker themselves, saying this is what happens if the policy changes, and this is how many families can get better, maybe better off by those changes. I think but also I think democratizing the rules, of course, which is like rules as code. We're all here for that thing. So I think that in terms of the technical manual, trying to democratize things and make sure people get the word out there about how these benefit programs work, and make sure it's easily understandable is sort of I think we're all on the same page about making that more accessible to the public, and I think there's a benefit to that unto itself in terms of how people understand programs.